achieved. But with Holly, I'll generally be happy for her and hope that she has, she accepts her loss in a healthy way and enjoys all the benefits that she got from this fight. And probably, I think that she'll really enjoy her life a lot more.
And that's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter what odds are on paper, what's happened before, or, it matters what happens that moment. There's a lot of times in practice, there's times before and after the fight, and when I get out there, I just think, you know what, the time's right now. You got to make it happen right now. Can't be an hour ago, it can't be tomorrow, it can't be during practice, it has to be right now.
One of the people you just heard talking is the UFC's women's bantamweight champion of the world. The other person you heard talking is Ronda Rousey. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night 78 event, which will double as the Ultimate Fighter Latin America 2 finale, which will take place on November 21st. I'll be giving you 4 main card predictions on this episode of the show, and I'll be breaking down 5 preliminary bouts. Because of the hectic schedule, I will be opting not to look at the tough finale fights. I just don't have the time to invest in those fighters, especially considering some of them will be one and done here in this scenario. Either way, I'm sure my prediction panel guys will break those fights down, so make sure you check into that. Now, the big topic. I already did my podcast. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I'm still going to address it here as well. Holly Holm, congratulations. You are the new women's bantamweight champion of the world in the UFC. It is fantastic. She destroyed Ronda Rousey. And Ronda Rousey was a very exciting champion. She really brought a lot of mainstream attention to the sport, but it's really unfortunate how she went out. You heard in that clip, you heard her talking about, and it's an extended clip, if you go and find it, you heard her talking about how she really looks, kindly upon the fact that she's able to give other women a chance to make some more money and be in the limelight for a short period of time by beating them. And then she talks about, as you heard, beating Holly Holm and the money she'll make and happy about that, blah, blah, blah. And it just seems like she got too big for her britches. She just got to the point where she was believing way too much in herself. And you have to wonder if complacency didn't seep into her routine. And again, it could have been that Rocky syndrome I talked about in my prediction, where she just knows that she's going to win fights. It seemed like she was talking about they were foregone conclusions. I think it was on one of the Jimmy Fallon shows. She talked about, I'm not going to let her kick me in the head and beat me. It's just not going to go down. That's ultimately what happened. Huge win for Holly Holm. I wish I had predicted it. But again, it's one of those situations where if I predicted and Ronda Rousey beats her, then I look like an absolute idiot for picking Holly Holm. And if Holly Holm wins, I look like a guy who probably, in most scenarios, guessed. Even though Holly Holm was a talented fighter and she proved it, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the, going forward in this division. But, very interesting nonetheless. Now, as far as my bet pack performances, I've gone 3 shows in a row where I've been below 500. Again, I did win money on one of those 3 shows because I had a solid gold parlay that won almost 60 units. Nonetheless, it's kind of disappointing. Again, I'm going to get $15, save you $15 in the bet pack subscription. So end of the year, 6 cards. That includes an exceptionally busy weekend. It's basically a weekend. Three fights in 3 nights in December, and then we have, I think we finished it off with UFC on Fox 17, I believe it is, to round out the year. It's also my birthday coming up this weekend, so I'm pretty excited about that. Hopefully I'll celebrate with a successful night. So without further ado, let's get to the first of our 4 main card predictions. The opening fight of the night takes place in the UFC's lightweight division as Efrain Escudero, 25-9-0, Ultimate Fighter winner, takes on 18-2-1 with 1 no contest, Leandro Silva, fighting out of Brazil. Now, taking a look at these 2 men, Escudero seems to be finally, at least, getting a little bit of momentum together with back-to-back UFC victories, at least harkening back to when he won the Ultimate Fighter and I think he won his first 3 UFC fights, and he's even his overall octagon record at 5 wins and 5 losses. For Silva, this is the second time in his UFC career he's not fighting in Brazil in the UFC. His first 4 bouts were at home, and for Escudero, this is the second time he's fought in Mexico. Now, there have been some talk about elevation being an issue. I don't think it's going to be a big issue in this event. It usually is in Mexico City, but look at Monterrey. It's only 1,770 feet above sea level. The air quality, some people have talked about that being possibly hurting fighters. For Silva, at least, he trains in Sao Paulo, which is significantly higher above sea level than Monterrey, so I don't think that shows up here. So it's actually a non-factor, so let's move on. Silva will have a 2-inch reach advantage. Escudero is 1 year younger. They are the same height. Silva has fought at welterweight before, so I see him as being the physically larger man. Accreditation-wise, Escudero, BJJ Blue Belt, NJCAA Wrestler versus Silva, BJJ Black Belt. So both guys predominantly ground-based fighters, capable of competing on the feet, but they make their money on the floor. Interesting stat regarding Efrain. He's 1-5 when he loses the takedown battle, most recently beating an opponent. One of his last wins was the first time he actually won a fight where he was taken down more than he took his opponent down and got the victory. But he is 0-5 when he lands 0 takedowns. So that's something to keep in mind here. When you look at Leandro Silva, 2.63 takedowns at a 37% completion rate. Over his 5 UFC fights, he has landed 10 takedowns. He also has 10 wins by submission, and he's 7-2 when going the distance with 1 knockout win on his record. For Escudero, 13-2 in fights ended by submission, 9-7 when going the distance. That's a concerning number, almost 500 record when the judges get involved. He has 2 wins by knockout. Looking at the Brazilian first, he's a pretty decent kicking game. That left kick is his primary weapon of choice. He'll go low, go to the body, and go high with it. He also has a nice front kick he'll throw down the middle. Look for him to slip in a counter right hand, and as he closes the distance and gets his opponent backing up against the cage, which limits their movement, look for him to launch a flying knee, which can have mixed results, but because his opponent isn't able to back up further, it increases the impact of that strike. Biggest issue with Silva striking is he tends to look for the big shot instead of letting his combinations flow, and that can allow him to be outworked by his opponent. Now, his wrestling is his primary method of attack. He has good level changes for a double leg, and he'll try and catch his opponent coming forward, and that really can be an effective technique. But, once on the mat, he has an issue with giving up position looking for submissions or getting out scrambled and getting put on his back, and that's something he wants to work on. Once you get on top, hold that position and really work to control your opponent. He had success against Francisco Trinaldo early on doing that, and I'd like to see him get back to that. In his last fight, he won the fight, but there were some issues with him giving up position. He was also taken out a couple times in that matchup, but, again, got the better of the grappling exchanges. Another issue with Silva is he has a tendency to either slow down in the final round, especially against Francisco Trinaldo. I thought he won the opening 2 rounds, and then he coasted in the third and ultimately lost the decision. I'd like to see him push the pace a little bit more and be more effective. For Escudero, he actually had a lot of success in the third round of his win against Lima, where he pushed the pace and was able to really cement that victory because of his efforts in the third round. His striking is decent. He has some decent combinations. Will mix in an uppercut, but again, he's a grappling-based fighter as well. Decent takedown defense along the fence. Will land some elbows when his opponent tries to really get in deep. But he was put on his back several times in that Lima victory. Against Drew Dober, he picked up a nice power guillotine submission win where Dober slipped early on. It was actually Escudero's first submission win since 2011 back in Bellator. He averages just 1.26 takedowns per fight, which isn't a big number for a guy who relies so much on his grappling. Escudero doesn't have the significant striking volume to outwork Silva, which is certainly a concern. I am worried about Silva's fight IQ and giving fights away that are close, especially when he's fighting in his opponent's home country. But I think Silva's wrestling and ability to set up his takedowns and timing his opponent's forward push for level changes will be the key to his success. Escudero, again, as I said, not great. Not a great record in decisions. Not a great record when he's taken down multiple times and loses the takedown battle, which I expect he will against Silva. Silva, I think he has success grinding this fight down, holds top position for the majority of the matchup, lands some decent strikes in the feet, and my prediction is Leandro Silva to defeat Efrain Escudero by decision. Fight number 2 on the main card is probably the most significant bout when you look at title implications. We are in the UFC's flyweight division. The third-ranked Jussier Formiga, 18 wins and 3 losses, takes on the 5th-ranked Henry the Messenger Cejudo with an undefeated record of 9 wins and 0 losses. Now, this is likely a number 1 contender's bout, seeing as what the current state of the division is. Formiga is the former number 1 ranked flyweight in the world. Cejudo, Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. So certainly no slouch either man, and UFC's looking for live bodies, warm bodies they can stick in there with the champion. Keep in mind, Demetrius Johnson has defeated the number 1 ranked fighter twice, number 2, 4, 6, 7, 12, and 13 in the division. That's darn impressive. They need more challengers, and the winner of this will probably fit the bill. Now, Formiga, he has really settled in after losing the first 2 of his 3 fights. Thrown right to the Sharks, losing to Joseph Benavidez and John Dodson right off the bat. He's picked up 3 wins since that slumping stretch. For Cejudo, 3 times in the UFC, 3 victories, including a win over common opponent with Formiga in Chris Carriazo. Physically, Formiga, 1 inch taller, will have a 3-inch reach advantage over his Olympic gold medalist opponent. For Formiga, he's a Novo União trained fighter. Very good grappling camp, very good striking camp as well. He's a multi-time BJJ world champion, so he's a fantastic fighter on the ground. BJJ black belt, also a black belt in judo. 8 of his wins have come by submission. He's 10-1 when going the distance. He is 0-2 though in fights ending by knockout, getting knocked out by John Dodson and Benavidez, losing a decision. Ian McCall, who was able to shut down his grappling for the most part, other than an early exchange in the first round. Pre-UFC, that fight took place a number of years ago. The best position for Formiga to be in is back mount. He is lethal from that position. He has 6 wins by rear naked choke. He, if he gets there, you are in serious trouble. He got there early against Wilson Hayes, but he ultimately lost the position and wound up on his back. But he is very good from that position. He's very good everywhere grappling. But if he gets there, he might only need one opportunity to put this fight away. Look for him to try and duck punches and rotate to the back and latch on to Cejudo. If he can't get the fight to the ground, that could be his best opportunity to set up his grappling. If he does try for takedowns, trip takedowns from the clinch or something he will look for, he will shoot, but against an Olympic wrestler, you're going to be very hard-pressed to shoot a wrestling-style shot and take him down. Sometimes he will rely on his opponent to start the grappling exchanges. He's a good scrambler and will capitalize. That happened a lot against Zach Makovsky. He does hold wins over American wrestlers like Makovsky and Scott Jorgensen, a little controversial with Jorgensen. But again, Makovsky was routinely initiating the grappling exchanges in that matchup and then getting out grappled once they went to the floor, and that's what Cejudo will try to avoid. Now, Formiga's striking is certainly improving. He's shown better head movement. He's got an overhand right. He'll mix in a straight left, which he'll set up with his right jab. But again, that's not his forte. Against Hayes, he did drop him with a big right hand, and again, he went right for back mount as soon as that fight hit the mat. So you know what he is looking for once he gets there. He was also countering Hayes a lot with his strikes, forcing him to be hesitant and not commit. I expect to see him do that if this fight is contested on the feet. He is improving footwork, and he was stepping back out of wrestling range because Hayes was trying to take him down and not having a ton of success. He has faded late in fights, which is certainly concerning against, but we'll talk about Cejudo's cardio in a moment. Look at Cejudo now as it concerns about his cardio. We're going to talk about it right now, not in a moment right now. Does he have the ability to go to full 15 minutes? He's had trouble making weight. He's had bad weight cuts. It really hasn't cost him yet, but it's just a matter of time at this level before it does catch up to you. He usually uses wrestling more defensively than offensively. 100% takedown defense, but averages only 2.33 takedowns at a 29% completion rate. He landed 6 against Chris Carriazo, and then he went 1 for 15 against Chico Camus, who did exceptionally well shutting those takedowns, and that was probably his hardest cut, actually, other than the fight that was canceled against Scott Jorgensen. So it's kind of in a mixed bag. Even though he's a great wrestler, he dictates where the fight takes place. He did have trouble taking Camus down, but he won the fight primarily on his feet, which is a good thing. If you can fall back on it, that's good. He has a good right hand, a nice 1-2 combination. A body kick is probably one of his best kicking techniques. Look for him to throw that. He does have a tendency to load up a little bit too much with his strikes. Camus was the more fluid striker in that matchup and was having success on the feet and held his own much more than the odds suggested. He cracked him a couple of times, and it's probably a good experience for Cejudo to be in a dogfight like that and come out on top. Ultimately, in this matchup, I think Cejudo's wrestling will allow him to dictate where this fight takes place. And Formiga, he really loses something when he's not able to get his ground game involved, and I think that will be the case here. But Cejudo has to be careful not to make a mistake, because Formiga will pounce and capitalize if he gives him that opportunity. We have a match of world-class grapplers, which could ultimately turn into a striking battle. I think Cejudo's striking is a little bit further along than Formiga's. Cejudo is the better athlete overall. He could slow down, but again, Formiga is not known for his cardio either and has slowed down in the final frame as well. My prediction is Henry Cejudo to defeat Jussier Formiga by decision. End of the evening, we're in the UFC's featherweight division, and yes, I said featherweight division, as the 4th-ranked former title challenger Ricardo the Bully Lamas, 15-4-0, takes on Diego the Nightmare Sanchez with a record of 27 wins and 7 losses, and that is the featherweight division. That is where Diego is fighting. Sanchez is debuting in the 145-pound division. To me, he seemed to struggle to make 155 pounds, and it clearly compromised his ability to compete, yet he's coming to 145 pounds. Keep in mind, he won the Ultimate Fighter at 185 as a middleweight, fought, probably his best division is welterweight. He's a little bit undersized there, but it doesn't strain him as much to get down. This will be very interesting to see what happens. I would not be shocked to see him not make weight. And keep in mind, too, Sanchez, when he won the Ultimate Fighter way back in the day, he fought Kenny Florian in the finals at 185. He made a similar progression down, eventually fighting at 145 pounds, fighting Jose Aldo for the title, and he said that it was an incredibly difficult cut, and it was really hard on him, so I can't imagine. And I think he's his body a little bit different. Maybe Sanchez has more fat to lose. I don't know. But either way, it's going to be difficult for Diego to make the weight cut. Let's move on from that point. Diego hasn't fought in 19 months. The last time we saw him was the robbery against Ross Pearson. He was supposed to fight late in 2014, which did not happen. Injuries prevented it. Hopefully the time away has allowed him to cut to 145 pounds properly and get down to a lean Diego, not just a guy who's going to try and dump a ton of water on weigh-in day and get down that way. For Lamas, he's returning after a devastating loss to Chad Mendes, just the second loss in 8 fights, and those two guys against Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo, two of the top fighters, the champion right now, and one of the top fighters in the division in Chad Mendes. He's only lost to the elite of late, but he's certainly out of the title picture with Aldo as champion. If McGregor becomes the champion, that opens up an opportunity for Lamas to work himself back into an opportunity to fight for the title. Physically, Sanchez 2 inches taller, 1 inch reach advantage. Lamas is only 1 year younger, surprisingly, even though Diego seems like he's been around forever. Keep in mind, Lamas also fought as a lightweight way back, I think his WEC days. Diego BJ black belt, 6 wins by knockout. Only loss came against BJ Penn for the title via knockout. 9-0 fights ended by submission, 10-6 when going the distance. So he's very durable, but that could be catching up to him. He hasn't finished an opponent since 2008, hoping the cut might give him a power and strength edge, possibly. We'll see. The last series of decision victories he's picked up, all were controversial. Ross Pearson, the split decision against Takanori Gomi, the controversial one against Martin Kampmann at welterweight left everybody scratching their head. The last time he legitimately beat somebody by decision was Paulo Thiago way back at UFC 121, so that should put things into perspective. He is a pretty good grappler and decent wrestling, even though he doesn't opt to use it very often. 1.56 takedowns at 21%, 48% takedown, so the stats don't back it up. He is capable, it just seems like he doesn't execute like he should. His striking, for the most part, is built around aggression, moving forward and trying to attack his opponent with mixed results. He really struggled with the more accurate and technical strikers, guys like Ross Pearson, Martin Kampmann, who had a ton of success countering. You might expect to see something like that similar here from Ricardo Lamas. For Lamas, he has looked very good climbing the ranks, fighting some top-ranked guys like Dennis Bermudez, Cub Swanson, beating those guys and moving up, getting his title shot. He's an NCAA Division II wrestler, BJ black belt, 4 wins by knockout, 4 submission victories as well, 3 of those coming by guillotine, which he caught Bermudez with, which he did very quickly, and we'll have to watch for that here, even though I don't anticipate him choking out Diego. It's a possibility. His wrestling numbers are not huge, 1.69 takedowns. He did land 2 against Hakran Diaz and had success there. But really doesn't put up big takedown numbers. Isn't known for smothering his opposition once he gets to the ground. He has good hands overall. He can do damage. Strikes for and against are a little bit close for my liking. He does have 3 losses by knockout: Yuri Alcantara, Danny Castillo, and the aforementioned Chad Mendes. So his chin could be a bit of a question mark. And if Diego can land something flush coming forward, catch him in a brawling scramble, could that be his key to success? Ultimately, I think the cut to featherweight won't be kind for Mr. Sanchez, for the nightmare or the dream, whatever he's called right now. He seemed to have trouble making 155 pounds. If he makes 145 okay, I still think he's going to struggle with the speed and technical ability of people in this division, including Ricardo Lamas. If the cut diminishes his durability, he's kind of, kept him relevant, I guess you could say that, quote unquote. We could see him get knocked out in this matchup, but I think Lamas outstrikes him primarily. Working his footwork and just being the quicker fighter, beats him to the punch routinely. He has to mix in his countering and being offensive and attacking to not let the judges see Diego's aggression as him winning the fight. And my prediction is Ricardo Lamas. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Ricardo Lamas defeats Diego Sanchez. I'm going to say by knockout. I think the cut's too much for Diego and he gets himself knocked out as a result. The Ultimate Fight Night 78 main event will take place in the UFC's welterweight division as the 13th ranked Neil Magny, 16-5-0, takes on Ultimate Fighter winner and 15th ranked Kelvin Gastelum with a record of 12 wins and 1 loss. Now, Magny is stepping in to replace the injured Matt Brown, which has certainly disappointed a lot of people. Matt Brown pulling out, always a fun fighter to watch. Magny was initially scheduled to take a fight at UFC 195 against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's had about 3.5 weeks notice to prepare for this matchup. This is his 5th fight in 2015, which is crazy. He fought, I believe, 4 times in 2014, could have been 5 times. He has been on a torrid pace for competition, and you gotta like a guy like that who's going after it. It's unfortunate because you think of the money he could have made fighting at that pace, pulling in big-time sponsorship for every matchup. Now, for Kelvin Gastelum, he's returning to the welterweight division after 1 fight at middleweight. He was forced asylum, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, sent by Dana White to the corner and told, go fight at 185 pounds so you get your shit figured out. He missed weight against Nico Masoki a couple of fights ago by a couple of pounds. Then he missed weight horribly in his last welterweight matchup against Tyrone Woodley. It came in at 180 pounds ultimately. And that turned into the first loss of his career. It didn't appear to affect him against Masoki. It did cost him against Tyrone Woodley in a close matchup that, the openings were there. He just wasn't able to go for it like he normally is, and that cost him. Physically, interesting matchup here. Neil Magny, 6-inch height advantage, 9-inch reach advantage. Kelvin is 4 years younger. Now, Gastelum, a BJJ purple belt, 4 wins by knockout, 3 by submission. He's 3-1 when going the distance, and he has some decent wins over noteworthy guys who are kind of at the end of their careers. Nate Marquardt and Jake Ellenberger also took a pretty entertaining split decision from Rick's story. And for Neil Magny, BJJ brown belt, 5 wins by knockout, 3-3 in fights ended by submission, 8-1 when going the distance. And he's got some nice wins, on his under his belt as well, taking out Eric Silva, Gung-Hoo Lim, Alex Garcia, Tim Means. His only loss in his last 9 fights coming by submission to grappling ace Damian Maia. Now, both guys for the most part are high output strikers, but vastly different in how they implement their striking game. A slight edge from Magny. He lands 3.77 strikes per minute versus 3.6 for Kelvin Gastelum. Bigger difference, though, is that Magny gets hit almost 1 strike less per minute than Kelvin. He does a better job of maintaining distance and keeping his opponents out of range. We'll see if that shows up in this matchup. For Gastelum, he does his best work in close, and that's where he differs from Magny. He likes to push forward behind his punches and continue to pressure and unload strikes once he gets on the inside and really overwhelm his opponent with those barrages. If he doesn't knock them out, at least it's scoring significant points and winning him the positional battle. He throws a nice body kick at range, which is something he'll have to use against Neil Magny's reach to kind of get on the inside, maybe be able to touch Magny from there, and then from that follow up, close the distance. For Neil Magny, he's really developed himself as a nice range striker. He wasn't using his reach as well as he could have when he started his UFC career, but it's really come around quite nicely. He throws some nice combinations, has some kicks. He'll work a lot off his jab, which is an effective tool when he has such a long reach. We did see Kelvin Gastelum when he fought Nico Masoki. He had a lot of trouble with the distance in the opening round. He landed just 4 strikes in the first round. He was really hesitant to engage. And every time he came in, Masoki countered and took him down or landed some counter strikes. And that's something I think we could see show up here. Where he did find success was in the second round when Masoki kind of deviated from using that distance, maintaining the distance, and Kelvin just kind of bull rushed him and got on the inside. Masoki wasn't able to circle out and get away from him. That's where Kelvin ultimately took over and won that fight as a result. So that's the big question. Who closes the distance? Who can close the distance or maintain the distance and be more effective there? The next big question is, can Kelvin get his wrestling involved in this matchup? Magny has had some issues with his defensive ground game. He has defended 65% of his opponent's takedown, 65% of his opponent's shots. He was submitted by Melvin Moraes and the aforementioned Maia, who are both slick BJJ practitioners, but still shows a vulnerability on the mat. He's been taken down in 11 to 12 UFC fights, but keep in mind he won 8 of them, so he knows how to get taken down, get back up, and be effective, and he knows what he has to do. He wins fights, especially the ones where he gets taken down. He wins fights with his striking volume. He lands more, gets hit less, does a decent job of getting up and striking during scrambles, which can be very effective as well. He has long limbs, which on the mat he needs to use them to help transition to superior positions or a better position than just laying flat on his back. But the crux of the thing is he needs to avoid being taken down. Now against Alex Garcia, who's kind of a similar built fighter to Kelvin Gastelum and has he's a power wrestler, he had success avoiding getting taken down, and that was important. Now the short notice for Magny. His fighting style should still translate well to a 5-round fight. A big question, though, is how does Gastelum do at the weight cut? He's fighting for a full 25 minutes without slowing down. Is that going to be possible? One of his biggest weapons is his torrid pace, and can he maintain that? Even against Rick's story, where the weight cut seemed to be okay, he was slowing down in the 3rd round of that fight, got hit, and made the fight much closer than it started out as, and that's something I think shows up here. I think it's going to be a close fight. I think Gastelum, has trouble getting on the inside early on. He will land some strikes, he will land a couple of takedowns, but I think he starts to slow down with Magny, just forcing him to work hard. Neil Magny getting back to his feet, landing with greater volume. I see Neil Magny certainly taking over as this fight goes deeper. As far as I know, it's a 5-round fight. That's what we're assuming. But I'm going to stick my neck out there. I think Neil Magny gets the better of the majority of the action in this matchup with his range striking. Takedown defense shows up, and my prediction is Neil Magny to defeat Kelvin Gastelum by decision. So those are my 4 main card predictions for the UFC Fight Night 78 event, which will take place on November 21st. It's certainly going to pale in comparison to what we just saw in the last event, but I'm still looking forward to it. 9 fights I'm going to predict overall, so please, don't have to ask, where are the other predictions? They're just not there. I'm going to try and maybe condense things, hopefully turn around my little bit of a slump here with just 9 fights to focus on. Keep in mind that we're on Twitter as well, so I will try and post as many times when my predictions start going up, when the bet packs are available. So if you're a regular customer, a regular viewer of my website, and you want to know exactly when things are up, make sure you check that out constantly. The other thing, what else was I going to say? Facebook as well. Check out our Facebook page. Like us there. I post all the videos there. And watch my UFC 193 post-fight podcast. Check out the prediction panel. And I guess that's it for now. I will see you after the bell, guys. Take care. Thanks for listening.